Today, an Afghan illegal immigrant was found guilty of abducting and raping a 12-year-old girl in Nuneaton.
Back! Send them back! Send them back! Send them back! Send them back!
You can feel it in the way towns go quiet before a march, not just anger now, but a brittle, focused exhaustion. Ordinary people are looking at what happened today and asking the same blunt question: who is actually keeping the streets safe? This afternoon, a court confirmed the guilt of a young man who had arrived in the UK without documentation and was sentenced for the abduction and sexual assault of a child in the Midlands. The crime itself is dreadful, but what followed across towns and city centers was bigger than a single act. Word spread fast on social apps. Communities emptied early from shops and factories, and within hours, protests and confrontations had erupted in multiple places. The immediate scene was chaos. Buses diverted, arterial roads closed, police cordons thrown up, and transport workers told to stop routes for safety reasons. For people sat in their cars or waiting on platforms, the disruption was the first sign that something ordinary had broken. These street scenes are not random. They flow from a deeper squeeze people live with every day, a house that costs more than the mortgage, a job where overtime is expected but never paid properly, local services creaking under demand, and a feeling that official priorities favor system rules rather than immediate safety. Into that pressure, a headline about a serious violent crime lands like a spark on dry tinder. For many, it confirms a long-held suspicion that government policy, legal delays, and overstretched enforcement have together created gaps criminals exploit and communities pay for. For others, it's a raw, urgent grief, a child harmed, a family destroyed, and any slow official response feels like betrayal. This is not to excuse violence on the streets. The scenes of crowds surrounding police vans, of stores smashed, and vehicles set alight are dangerous, unlawful, and undermine public safety. But to understand how we reach this point, you must look at the sequence. Repeated reports of arrivals by small boat, long waits for asylum processing, hotels used to house people while decisions move at months or years, and a persistent public sense that the system offers neither deterrence nor swift consequence. In 2025, more than 41,000 people arrived in small boats crossing the channel, a figure that forced migration and border control to the center of political debate and public alarm. That scale has intensified pressure on councils, emergency services, and local economies. When protests first concentrated in towns such as Nuneaton and then spread to other urban centers, police were forced into split-second choices: defend accommodation sites, hold transport routes open, or try to prevent damage to local businesses. In several towns, hotel sites used to house asylum seekers were targeted by angry crowds, sometimes with violent episodes in and around those sites. Those attacks are not merely a headline. They represent a real strain on local policing resources and have instigated legal actions and emergency injunctions in prior waves of unrest. Journalists and agency reporting from last year show how protests around asylum accommodation have, on occasions, escalated into confrontations and property damage, creating a cycle of fear, reaction, and legal intervention that repeats across the country. Officers on the ground describe scenes of overloaded control rooms. Calls for ambulances and unrelated emergencies had to be prioritized or delayed because major thoroughfares were blocked by protests. In such a scenario, the visible police presence shields up. Vans forming protective perimeters becomes both an attempt to keep the peace and a symbol of how stretched capabilities have become. That is part of the anger on the streets. People arguing that resources appear aimed at managing demonstrations rather than preventing the criminal behavior and social disruption they see as the root cause. To many observers, that is not merely a matter of equipment. It is a question of priorities and trust. Political leaders responded quickly, some with calls for calm and law enforcement, others with sharper rhetoric about border control and immediate deportation. The Prime Minister, who campaigned on getting illegal migration down, urged restraint and pointed to recent legislation designed to make returns easier. Critics argued the response sounded distant to people stuck in gridlocked towns and stunned by the footage of smashed shops and injured officers. Media and opposition voices amplified that gap. One well-known campaigner for stricter border control published a video calling for emergency deportation measures and criticized government accommodation policy. The arguments reverberated online and fed into mass demonstrations. At the same time, commentators in other countries used the unrest to score political points, making the situation feel international as well as local. Behind these visible political rows is a technical, legal tangle. The asylum system is governed by legislation, human rights obligations, and a complex appeals process that have built-in protections designed to prevent wrongful returns. Critics say those protections are now being exploited, allowing people to delay removal or access rights that make quick deportation impractical. Defenders of the system say the protections are necessary to prevent sending people back to real danger. The practical effect, though, is what many residents describe on the doorstep. Delays measured in months and years, accommodation paid for by councils and central funding, and an appeals process that ties resources up for extended periods. This is not speculation. It's the lived reality of local authorities receiving people while the legal machinery moves slowly. That slowness has political consequences, because when citizens see repeated headlines and the occasional highly publicized crime, anger grows faster than the capacity to answer it. There are hard facts that feed the debate. Official and independent sources show the number of crossings has risen significantly in recent years, putting pressure on returns, systems, and local housing arrangements. At the same time, there are examples in multiple parts of the country of protests converging on hotels and temporary accommodation sites, sometimes leading to criminal damage and arrests. Those episodes are politically costly and operationally difficult. The pattern is becoming familiar. An allegation or conviction, a viral social media video, rapid mobilization of a local crowd, and then an escalation that local services struggle to control. Public safety professionals warn of a dangerous feedback loop. If people lose faith in official channels, if they believe reporting, policing, and the courts do not deliver swift enough protection, some will turn to public protest, and a minority will cross the line into criminal acts. That shift creates a new problem for police. Policing disorder becomes a higher priority than long-term crime prevention. The result is officers spending more hours containing unrest than on proactive patrols in areas where domestic burglaries, youth violence, or other crimes are rising. The consequences ripple through every local service. Health trusts see staff delayed or unable to reach hospitals. Local businesses face sudden closures. Public transport operators cancel lines to protect staff. That is the immediate measurable harm that makes already high anxieties explode into visible unrest. Amid the turmoil, it is vital to be precise. When police make arrests at demonstrations, those arrests are lawful and necessary to keep the peace. When activists or crowds damage property, they are committing criminal offenses that put people at risk and harm livelihoods. But policing and legal actions alone cannot close the wider trust gap. Long-term solutions need two things together: operational capacity to manage borders and criminal networks, and clear communication that restores public confidence that ordinary people and communities will be protected first. Without both, the cycle risks repeating. One practical pressure point is accommodation. Councils and private providers put people in hotels and other short-term lodging while their asylum claims are processed. This is expensive for the public purse and politically sensitive when local people see entire hotels dedicated to the use of recently arrived migrants while council services struggle. Opponents argue that processing on the continent or faster removal is the only effective answer. Defenders counter that international law constrains how quickly people can be removed and that rushed decisions risk grave injustice. The public is left with a visible symbol of the problem. Places they used to rely on for holidays and conferences, now housing men and women in limbo, while local services absorb the cost and disruption. Another pressure point is the illegal smuggling networks. Criminal gangs profit from channel crossings, and tackling those groups requires international cooperation, intelligence sharing, and maritime enforcement. Governments have rolled out new measures aimed at disrupting gangs, but evidence from border agencies shows it is a complex business one where each sidestep by smugglers can create new flows that arc around the latest clampdown. That is why experts say there is no single instant fix. A chain of diplomatic, legal, operational, and economic changes is needed to reduce the overall flow sustainably. In the immediate aftermath of today's violence, local leaders are asking for clear, short-term steps: Reinforcements to policing numbers were necessary, better protection for local services, more transparent information to prevent disinformation spreading online, and rapid disruption of organized crime where evidence supports it. They are also asking for support for victims, not only victims of the crime that sparked the unrest, but shopkeepers, transit workers, and officers injured in confrontations. A society that focuses only on the headline crime and ignores the ripple effects risks, allowing the reaction to create more harm than the original offense. The courts matter too. Prosecutors and judges operate within strict rules of evidence and rights. But when the public sees sentences that appear light or long delays before cases reach court, their anger is amplified. Reforming judicial timetables and resourcing courts so they can process more cases swiftly is part of the practical package that could reduce the sense of impunity. At the same time, any reforms must not erode rights that prevent wrongful removals or miscarriages of justice. The balance is politically hot but legally essential. One reality of these moments of unrest is that misinformation travels faster than any official press release. A short clip taken out of context, a mislabeled image, or a rumor about a decision in Whitehall can spiral into a crowd with an immediate physical impact on the ground. That is exactly why local and national institutions must invest in rapid, credible communication, not spin, but clear facts. If a council can publish verified facts about accommodation numbers, if a police force can promptly outline arrests and operational priorities, then a lot of the space that misinformation occupies can be closed. It is not easy, and it requires trust that many communities say has been eroded. So where does that leave us? We are at a dangerous crossroads. The combination of significant channel crossings in recent seasons, recurring local accommodation arrangements, slow legal processes, and visible crimes has created a combustible public mood. When a horrific crime becomes the catalyst for a broader outpouring of anger, the state's response must be threefold: protect people on the ground, move to address the underlying structural problems that feed the unrest, and rebuild trust through transparent action and clear results. Without all three elements working together, temporary calm will be followed by the next spark. In the hours and days to come, expect three things to be tested: whether police can maintain order without appearing to choose spokes of enforcement over everyday safety, whether ministers can show credible, measurable steps on removals and smuggling disruption, and whether local leaders can communicate clearly with their communities. If any of those fail, the cycle of protest, shutdown, and damage will repeat. This is a national conversation about safety, law, and who pays the price when systems creak. It is also a local conversation about shopfronts broken by rocks, families kept inside after schools close early, and hospital corridors filled extra hours because staff cannot reach work. The human detail is where policy meets consequence. The parents who collect children early from school because they fear flashpoints, the bus drivers who lock their cabs against a crowd, the small business owner who counts the cost of a smashed window and the day's takings lost. Those real-world impacts are what officials must consider as they make policy decisions in Whitehall and in council chambers. Finally, while the headlines will be about arrests, speeches, and footage of clashes, a message to everyone watching this footage from home. Public safety depends on law and order, on the courts doing their job, and on borders being managed effectively, but it also depends on responsible public behavior. Anger explains but does not excuse criminal damage. Peaceful protest is a right. Attacks on people and property are not. The path out of this crisis is hard, and it requires steady political will, operational muscle, legal clarity, and community-level work that rebuilds trust one interaction at a time. If the coming days bring calm enforced by force without real solutions, the same tinder will be there for the next flare-up. If they bring calm plus clear, transparent action on the structural problems we've described: enforcement against organized smugglers, faster, fairer processing, better protection for victims, and credible reinvestment in local services, then today's fury might mark a turning point. We will keep following the facts, bring verified updates, and hold authorities to account on what they promised and what they deliver. For now, the visible damage on our streets is a message. Something is broken, and unless it is fixed in concrete ways that people can see and feel, the pressure will only build until the next time the spark falls.